Yep, and I'm about to spotlight you. There you go.
Okay. Thank you so much. So as Erin said, I am very excited to be here. I work with Erin at Juvenile Law Center. I am a staff attorney there and currently working with Erin on a brief. So thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm very excited to talk about this topic. It's very, very important. So I'll just go ahead and jump right in. Let's see. Can you all see my screen right now?
Yes.
Great. All right. So Erin asked me to talk a little bit today about knowing your rights and the different rights that young people and their families have in various systems within U.S. political systems. So I'll start off with the question of what is juvenile law? So as I mentioned, I work at Juvenile Law Center. And for us, juvenile law encompasses so many different areas. So child labor laws, what are the minimum age and minimum wage requirements for young people who are working, looking at foster care and child welfare system, what are the rights of the young people who are involved in those systems and are put in placements outside of their family settings. Juvenile justice and municipal violations, those are different, but they're kind of they overlap a little bit. So juvenile justice is kind of the typical what we see when young people are arrested and accused of violating laws. And then municipal violations are similar in that young people can be ticketed for, let's say, truancy, so missing school, curfews. A lot of cities have curfews for young people. You can't be out past a certain time. So there can be fines for those violations as well for young people and for their families. And then emancipation of minors, so young people who are seeking to be emancipated from their families and have more rights rather than waiting till age 18. So those are just a few examples, but there's so many different types of laws. So let's just kind of hop right into it. So when young people are put into placement, and when I say placement, I mean, so in the juvenile justice system, being placed into a facility outside of the home, or in the child welfare system, being placed in, let's say, a group home, a foster care home. So just any placements that are outside of their families or outside of their home. Here are some of the rights to be aware of. So young people have the right to be free from corporal punishment. So should not be physically abused in any way. And this kind of goes into the second bullet point as well, but this isn't highlighted as much, and it should be, but verbal abuse as well. Young people have the right not to be cursed at, yelled at, screamed at by staff or officers or other people working in those placements. And the right to be free from unreasonable searches. Your property is yours. Even if you're in that specific facility or residential home, it's your property, and people can't just go through your stuff. You have the right to be made aware of grievance policies and to file grievances. So essentially that just means complaints, right? So if any of, for example, one of the first 3 bullet points are occurring, you have the right to know how to complain about those policies and how to get help. So filing grievances, sometimes it may be vocally, just talking to a specific person, or sometimes there are more formal ways to file a grievance where you have to fill out a form about what happened, but you have the right to know exactly what that policy is so you can take advantage of it if you need to. And continuing on, for young people in placements, the right to privately send and receive mail. You shouldn't, your mail shouldn't be always opened. That does change a little bit if you're in a more secure facility. For example, in the juvenile justice system, there are different rules there where a lot of times, unless it's legal mail, officials can open, officers there can open your mail. But typically when we're talking about a residential facility, group home settings, you have the right to have that privacy in your mail and your communications with folks. The right to use a phone, have connections with people outside, and says reasonable rules apply. Sometimes there are time restrictions, like not between this time and that time, because of shift change or what have you, but you do have the right to use a phone and communicate with your loved ones and friends as well. Young people in placement have the right to save and use their own money. This comes up a lot, especially in juvenile justice system with commissary. A lot of times money can be taken out of that, but it shouldn't be all of your money. You should be able to keep some of your money. And so when I say money is taken out of that, what we've seen at Juvenile Law Center is if you have any outstanding fines or fees or restitution even, sometimes it will be taken out of your commissary, which is horrendous and something that we definitely advocate against on our economic justice team. But you do have the right to at least have some of that money saved so that you can use it for necessities. And of course, the right to contact your attorney, so being able to communicate with them, whether it's through mail, email, phone, but you have the right to continue to speak with them and, maybe have visits with them, but continue staying knowledgeable about your case. If, for example, if this is in the juvenile justice system. And I mentioned earlier, young people and their families. So families as well have rights when young people are involved in or placed in different outside facilities or outside of the home, essentially. So the family have the right to receive services that help the young people stay with or return to the family. So, maybe it's group therapy, family therapy, reunification is sometimes what it's called, where it's a process of like reunifying the family through a series of meetings and different steps before just putting the young person back in the family, just making sure it'll be the right setting before that huge change in a living situation. Families also have the right to make reasonable efforts to place children with their siblings. So if siblings are being placed, this comes up a lot in the foster care child welfare system, but if young people are being placed in a setting outside of where their siblings are being placed, having the right to either identify, a relative and let them know, for example, that, this is where the young person is staying, this is where their siblings are staying. Here are your options if you want to adopt, if you want to take the young person and their siblings in, which kind of ties into the third bullet point of relatives need to be notified within about 30 days of a young person entering care. And that 30 days varies depending on what state you live in, but typically 30 days is something that we see. And then the birth family of relatives have the right to enter into an agreement with a child's adopted family. So for example, let's say the birth parents are transferring guardianship to a relative or to another family, they have the right to enter into an agreement to talk about visitation rights or just what that continued contact will look like. Having that private agreement for visitation is really, really huge. So and going on, young people's families have the right, so young people have the right to have visits with their parents or, relatives, depending on who that caretaker or guardian was. This can be limited by the court if, sometimes there's abuse or neglect going on. So then there will be a few more restrictions there. Maybe it's supervised visits, maybe it's, less frequent visits, but typically there are those rights. And then siblings having visits with siblings, if they're not put in the same placement. So this says 2 times a month. That's something we see in Pennsylvania, which is where Juvenile Law Center is based, but maybe in other states it's different, but typically there are requirements for how often a young person can see their siblings who they aren't living with. And, this is for young people specifically, but visits are not supposed to be used as some sort of reward or punishment. So they shouldn't be taken away from you to punish you for anything or given to you as a reward. This is a right that you have to have these visits with your siblings and parents or guardians. And this is different than a home pass. A home pass is where the young person is given a pass to go home and leave the facility. Those tend to have a few more restrictions than just having visits where people come into the setting that you're in to see you. And then so rights with the court, again, this is going to depend on where you live. but young people have the right to have, so this is specifically on the child welfare and foster care side. So a right to have a court review hearing at least every 6 months, just to have the court check in on, how are things going in this placement that you're in? How are you doing? How is it serving you? Are you getting the services that you need? So that's very, very important to make sure that things are going well for the young person being placed outside of the home. And in order to have that happen, young person is supposed to receive notice to be able to have the opportunity to be present at court. Maybe that's changed during COVID times. It may be a video conference, but you have the right to be part of those proceedings. It shouldn't be happening without you. And then if there is a GAL in your case, so a GAL is a guardian ad litem, which is a Latin term. It essentially just means an attorney for the child. It's not always an attorney. Sometimes it's a court-appointed special advocate who isn't specifically an attorney, but essentially this is a person who the court has appointed to represent you as the young person. They do not have any obligations to parents, guardians, any other parties in the case. It's just the young person, and they advocate either for the best interests of the young person or for the young person's expressed stated interests. It can be, it depends on, what state you live in. But the young person has the right to be notified that this person has been appointed in their case, and the right to talk to them. They, should, of course, the guardian ad litem should be talking to the young person and understanding what are their interests and what are their needs and what makes sense for them to present to the court on behalf of the young person. And of course, the young person has the right to be consulted. This depends on age, of course, but at an age appropriate setting by the judge about permanency and transition plans. So thinking about, placements outside of the home are supposed to be temporary. This isn't supposed to be a long-term solution or option. So as the court and the judge and the guardian ad litem are creating a permanent plan for the young person to live outside of the home or return back to the home, depending on the situation, the young person should absolutely be a part of all of those conversations about the permanent plan as well as the transition to that permanent plan. So this is more on the child welfare and foster care side, but very important to know that you have a right to be part of those discussions. And these medical and behavioral healthcare rights are, independent of whether a young person is part of a child welfare system, juvenile justice system. This is just generally young people have the right to consent at any age to substance abuse treatment. So sexually transmitted infection treatment and testing, contraception and pregnancy testing, HIV treatment, and then all Medicare medical care if the young person is pregnant or has already graduated from high school. And then we added except abortion in here because that, depends on what state you're living in. Sometimes they do actually require parental consent, parental knowledge for an abortion, but typically young people have the right to, a wide range of treatments and testing options. It's a matter of finding a clinic near you that is able to do that. Maybe it's Planned Parenthood, maybe it's a local clinic, but finding those supports that can help you with the treatment and support that you need, as well as behavioral health treatment. At age 14 or older is typically the age that we see where young people can reach out and get some of the support they need, whether it's mental health concerns or just more general behavioral health concerns, but getting that treatment and diagnosis as well. So the Affordable Care Act, kind of this federal law, and how does this, apply to young people? So for one, the adult basic plan is typically the main state insurance plan that low-income adults with who are living without a disability and don't have any children. So, maybe a young person who has aged out of foster care or something like that. Like these are things, this is a plan that is an option for them. And then also effective in 2014, young people who have aged out of foster care are covered actually by Medicaid until age 26. So Medicaid provides services and but I don't want to get too into the details, but Medicaid is a federal program that helps typically helps young people or low income people who need healthcare and need affordable healthcare, right? So this is something that is available to young people who have aged out of foster care. Very, very significant because we see a lot of times when young people age out of foster care. So that means they are over age 21 and no longer receiving the services that they had been receiving, independent living services from the foster care system. So being able to have affordable healthcare is very, very crucial. So very important part of the Affordable Care Act. So the rights of older youth who are in care. So this is, specifically on the foster care side. In almost all states, I believe all states except for 3, young people can be in foster care and can receive those services up to age 21, as long as they were placed in foster care before age 18. So not diagnosed, sorry, but deemed dependent before age 18, they can continue receiving those services. So the rights of older youth in foster care, so receiving all permanency services until they exit care. And then, as I said on the previous slide, once they exit care, being able to have the option of Medicaid or the adult basic plan for healthcare specifically. And then IL is independent living, sorry for the acronym. So independent living services beginning at least age 16. So besides healthcare, we think about, job training, employment work options, education services, a number of those things beginning at least age 16. And this independent living plan is supposed to be updated every 6 months. So the court is supposed to, work with you and identify what are different needs you have. So maybe 6 months ago, you weren't as focused on job training, but now it's something that you really want help with as you're getting older and getting prepared to exit the foster care system. So it's really important to keep updating that every 6 months. And then, as I said before, older youth can stay in foster care after age 18, as long as they were adjudicated dependent or deemed to be someone who needed foster care, child welfare services before the age of 18. And that's really it. Juvenile Law Center, we have a wide range of topics. So Erin and I work together on our court systems and adulthood team. Typically that focuses a lot on young people sentenced to life without parole, or really, really long, lengthy terms of incarceration. We also have an economic justice team where we work to abolish fines and fees. And so I mentioned that briefly, but a lot of times young people involved in the juvenile justice system and their families are charged fines for, related to the offense that they committed, as well as fees for, you get a fee for having a public defender, a fee for filing for expungement, a number of different costs that add up. And so our goal is to abolish those across the country. We also have a child welfare team, which is kind of self-explanatory. Youth advocacy team, so many different teams. So we work on a wide range of topics. And as I mentioned before, juvenile law to me encompasses so many different areas, but you can check out our website, jlc.org. Give us a call. We have a intake and referral line, and I have my email address on here as well. So really happy to be here with you this morning. I know it's early, but thank you so much for being here. And thank you again, Erin, for having me.
Yes, Katrina, thank you so much. I think you are definitely correct. Juvenile law, it just contains so much. And you touched on like the general things I definitely wanted to talk about, because it's so hard to really know what to talk about in that huge field of juvenile law, because it can touch on so many different topics. It's like you can have issues with racial like equity within the system, but then you can have general issues with the actual system. So thank you so much. I think another thing I learned working at Juvenile Law Center is like even the calls we get. So I think this whole presentation was really just to open up young people's eyes to realize they have different rights, and it's over a big spectrum. And it's not just, oh, what are my rights if I get pulled over? And what are my rights when I'm dealing with this? Like, that's one small spectrum, which we'll definitely talk about like at a later time. But when it comes to general juvenile law rights, it's so much. So I do want to like stress, reach out. If you think something's wrong, if you think like something's going off and you're dealing with the system, reach out to someone who knows about juvenile rights. Because even as a lawyer, I think I've run into a lot of people who are great at their job, but juvenile law is such a specific type of thing that they don't even know all the rights of the youth. So if you think there are issues, just reach out and somebody will help, especially somebody who's like really studying juvenile law, because you learn so much. Even just like Katrina said, we've been working on like a different briefs, and I've been working on like juvenile life without parole stuff, and I've learned different rights that apply to everyday life, just for people under the age of 18 working on things that you think wouldn't affect you. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here, and use my email if you need me. And of course, use Erin. Erin is a really great resource. So it's so great to see her wearing two hats, executive director and legal fellow, doing lots of great work at Juvenile Law Center.